Welcome and good morning to all our committee members and our staff and anyone who will be watching us online. With that in mind, this meeting is being held in the supper room of the Waihinga Centre in the Martinborough Town Hall, and it is being live streamed and will be available to view on Council's YouTube channel. We don't have any members of the public in the room, and I think everyone knows our emergency exits. Violet, as this is your first meeting, would you be happy to open our morning with a karakia? Wonderful, thank you.
Kia hora te marino, kia whakataka pārana te moana. Hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, aroha te aroha mai. Tātou I a tātou ka.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
We have apologies from Connolly this morning, and also apologies for lateness from Councillor Bosley and Councillor Maynard.
Sorry, Madam Chair, he is not an apology. He's not a member of council at the moment, so it's not an apology.
Thank you. We'll just go with the two apologies for Councillor Bosley and Councillor Maynard. Do I have someone to move that? Thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Plummer. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Motion is carried. Do we have any conflicts of interest this morning? No?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
That's my normal one with bylaw.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. And we don't have any public participation registered this morning, which will take us to extraordinary business. Yeah, so that takes us to extraordinary business. We have one item to consider, and this is a members' report from Councillor Olds regarding the funding of traffic management plans for Anzac Day events. This report was not included in the original agenda because clarification was required from community groups about their requirements for funding, and information was obtained after the agenda had been released. This item cannot be delayed until the next meeting of the committee because funding needs to be confirmed before Anzac Day. Do I have a mover to confirm that this extraordinary business be added to the agenda as item D1? Councillor Elams, thank you. And do I have a seconder? Violet, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against? Motion is carried. This item will be heard as item D1. Do we have any other items of extraordinary business this morning? Fantastic. Zooming almost right along to minutes for confirmation. We are considering the Strategy Working Committee meeting minutes from the 14th of February. Are we aware of any corrections that need to be made to those minutes? That being the case, do I have a mover to confirm the minutes? Councillor Olds. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Macaulay. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? The motion is carried. We got any matters arising from the previous minutes? Perfect. Right, that will take us to our first decision report for the morning. It is item B1, the Freedom Camping Bylaw deliberations. Ms. Bradley, would you like to speak to the report at all? Nikki?
Yeah, we've got Natalie.
Yes, the consultants.
And they want to chip in as well, because obviously it's vital sits in his portfolio of work. And Stella asked me to reset. And now I can't see the report.
Did you want to?
Okay, it's coming. I think it's going to open. I can take the report as read. Obviously, this piece of work has been going on since about the middle of last year. Thank you, Amy. We're very lucky to secure funding from MB to enable us to do this work. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have had capacity to deliver the quality of review and community engagement and participation that has taken place. Some of you have participated in some of that formal consultation process, which was incredibly appreciated, and the feedback that came back from the community was very valuable in shaping the bylaw. I guess we could just open questions. This bylaw, the draft came to the council for deliberations, for hearings a little while ago. And now we're up to the approval process.
So just while we're waiting for Emma, just remind everybody that as with any bylaw of this nature, this has been through our formal hearings process. We've received submissions and had 2 people come and speak in person with that hearings committee, and that's what we're dealing with now. Good morning, Emma. Can you hear us?
I can, thank you.
Fantastic, welcome. So Amanda's just introduced the paper and we're going to open to questions, so they may come your way as well. Councillors, do you have any questions this morning regarding this bylaw? Councillor Elams.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I was certainly reading through the paper, and page 25, there was information there about some of the submissions, and particularly submissions including Vintners Lane. And reading through the paper submission that had been submitted by a member of our Martinborough community, they provided information regarding the issues that they saw as risks with Vintners Lane. I'm just wondering as to why staff did not consider that there was any evidence that freedom camping within 500 metres of the dump station would be an issue.
Just to respond to your question, Councillor, through the chair, we've got some really strict criteria that we need to consider when we are applying any prohibitions or restrictions. And they have to do with public health and safety. They have to do with protecting access to the area and then protecting the area in itself. And the presence of a dump station is actually infrastructure that supports camping. So it's a bit of a mental gymnastics to justify that under the Act. But you'll note on page 25, we refer the reader to section 6.2, and I don't have the page reference for that, but if you give me a moment, I will find it, where we talk about the township restrictions. That was something that the submitters did also touch on when they were discussing Vintners Lane, because the township restrictions we have is a more of a umbrella restriction over our more urban residential areas. It did happen to fall just outside the area of Vintners Lane that the submitters were referring to, and so staff are suggesting that as a way to address the concerns of the residents and business owners of Vintners Lane, that we extend the township restrictions, because that can kind of be captured under that reasoning of having a more of a broader approach to how we manage our residential areas, as opposed to it being a sort of a ban around a dump station, which didn't have the same, I guess, weight under the Act. So that would mean the township restriction would apply, which has a maximum number of nights that people can camp before having to move on, rather than the district-wide, which is the national status quo where freedom camping is permitted.
Thanks for that. Because I certainly am aware that the Vintners Lane is certainly not a wide piece of road. I certainly take on board the points that the submitters have made, that being narrow, being constricted, and the grass surfaces during winter are soft. and vehicles do get stuck, etc. And no, it was good to see, thank you, that Vinters Lane has been included in that umbrella approach for the whole township. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Any other questions for the team this morning? Councillor Olds.
Yeah, I just want to make an observation, and I appreciate the work that's into getting us to where we're at right now. And a lot of obviously what we've been talking about over the last 6 months or so, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, really captures the essence of the likes of the coastal areas in particular, which is a passion area for me in particular. And a lot of it stems from our original bylaw of camping in coastal areas. So I'm very pleased and I'm grateful we've got a bylaw that now will cover off on those areas. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Plummer.
So I'm not going to vote on this one way or another, but it's my conflict. But I'm really interested just to understand how this bylaw is going to be actually enforced, and whether we're passing a bylaw with no teeth, because you're all aware of my comments that I've made over the last few years that if you pass a bylaw, you've got to be able to enforce it. Otherwise, what's the point in a bylaw?
Absolutely. I think that will lead to the point that I was going to raise, but we'll let Emma speak to your question first.
I believe we've got Russell in the room as well. So I'll let him expand on, but I'll just make some general comments rather than throwing the ball directly to you, Russell. The enforceability of this bylaw, it has a bit more teeth, as you put it, than maybe other bylaws, because it has our enabling legislation under the Freedom Camping Act. And with the amendments that we saw mid last year to the Act that the outgoing government made, it's provided council with a tiered approach to infringements. So we're able to actually apply fines that are responsive to the level of breach, rather than it just being a blanket. I think it was a $200 fine. So we have the opportunity, if freedom campers are found to be really damaging areas that are prohibited or that are outside the scope of what they should be camping on, we can apply infringements to the tune of thousands of dollars. But of course, the enforceability, where we've got our issue of the wide geographic area of the district. That's why I guess we've targeted on those areas that needed it the most, rather than looking at blanket district-wide rules. Hence the township restrictions. We're narrowing in on the areas that we want to be focusing on. A lot of other councils do have like district-wide rules. We've shied away from that just for that very reason of making sure it's actually the rules that we're putting in place we intend to be responsive to. I think we've mentioned it in the report, the intended enforcement approach is more reactionary. So rather than proactively going and visiting these places every morning to check for freedom campers, we'll be responding to complaints. As you're all aware, we've got a really engaged and proactive community, especially out in coastal areas, who are not shy at letting us know when people aren't following the rules. So we're able to respond in that way. Amanda, I wonder if you want to talk about the ambassador program as well, because that really plays into the...
Thanks. No, we were also successful in getting some additional money from MB to run our ambassador program. With staff leaving towards the end of last year, we haven't had the capacity to implement that program this summer, which was our intention. But we have been able to get an extension to that funding through to the end of this calendar year, which means we will be able to set that program of work up in the spring when camping starts up again, and do an education program. The funding also includes some planned signage. So we've got a draft comms and signage plan as well that will help do that community education leading up into next summer.
Wonderful. Any final questions?
I'm not quite sure that sort of answers my question about how signage is not enforcement.
Sorry, just before we move on, Russell, did you have anything to add from a regulatory perspective?
Yeah, thank you. My comments are based on these aspects. Pertinent question asked by Councillor Plummer in terms of the formulation of the policy. factoring in of implementation or awareness of implementation. Good policy has to be aligned to implementation capacity, so that's always been factored in or tipped as the policies roll forward. The consultants have absorbed that, as Amanda. I just jumped councillors back to the chair made reference earlier to this is about the decision. We had elements of deliberation last time and the topic of implementation came up in terms of if people aren't, if they're staying for too long, or for example, but the council has also considered the scale of our workforce in terms of implementation. So you did discuss this amongst the mix of topics and the overall policy last time you met. Obviously, good policy has to have an implementation component. We have to be active in the space. The consultant has captured the aspect of probably in the realm of if we get complaints, then we will head out to respective areas in a timely way and respond. We have the resources, the resource we have. The only other factor I can allude to is in terms of our workforce planning going forward, we've got the component of a ranger role going forward. So that's my view in terms of scale and inspiration.
Thank you. And Councillor Woodcock, your question.
Well, I was very much on same point as Alistair, actually. I've always been, I voiced this when this first come up about policing these bylaws and the actual real capacity of being able to do it, what it costs the ratepayer in the meantime. I know we've got funding for it, but how long does that funding last? What happens when the funding runs out? I've also got a question here. So in number 7 options, see what page it is. It says that the changes recommended under the advantages column, the changes recommended to the bylaw reflect the community feedback. Well, obviously this isn't fully correct because we've had, as councillors had an email yesterday from someone in town that is claiming that they really haven't been listened to. Well, I read it. So I'm a little bit dubious as to how much of the feedback has been taken into account and how far the the consultation stretch has gone.
I can talk to that, Chair. I think when conducting any kind of consultation, you will get a variety of views based on any question or idea that you pose, and the balance is trying to figure out where the majority of people feel comfortable, and you still will have outliers to that opinion, and that you need to expect that. And that when we say we've considered the perspectives of everybody, consideration doesn't necessarily mean agree with. And obviously we've got legislative requirements. Sometimes people want us to do things that are outside legislation or outside the remit of the work that we're conducting. So we have to be really mindful about that as well. So I don't think that saying that we've considered everyone's opinion means that we will necessarily agree with everyone, because we can't. We have to you have to make a decision based on the broad feedback that has been gathered and where the best option is for this council.
Well, this person is actually claiming that you were in this report. Their words are the statement is rather disingenuous, because they're sort of claiming that staff or whoever's been doing the job hasn't actually done their work properly, because they're stating that had various they put various things into council with emails and complaints and about bits and pieces where it seems in this report it's stating the opposite. These people are affected quite heavily by this bylaw, by the freedom.
The email, so I can't comment.
Yeah, I think that, as Amanda's pointed out, there'll always be a spectrum of feedback. The email you refer to is in line with the questions that Councillor Elam's raised earlier, and that there is this umbrella town-wide sort of protection for those in that area as well. Yeah, councillor Macaulay.
Yes, just in terms of the enforcement aspect, and I do understand councillor Plummer's concerns, but I think, you know, we can't stop having important bylaws because there is an enforcement issue. And I think, you know, we are always going to be short of resources in the present climate on this. But, you know, presumably it's just we have to have a prioritisation system. So the enforcement staff we have go and sort of pick on the most serious transgressors. I don't think it's a valid argument to question us having the bylaws if there is this like problem with the enforcement. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll just round out with councillor.
Yeah, I just had a comment about the enforcement side of the bylaw to a large extent, because as some of you may be aware, that I was the coastal ranger for a number of years by council, and patrolled that area over the camping or the holiday period, basically from the end of November through till about March the following year. And that was a role that was funded for by council, for instance, and resourced accordingly. So perhaps some consideration when we get to some of our more in-depth conversations around long-term planners, that that type of resource could be included in those discussions.
And you'll note in recommendation 5, which talks about the Freedom Camping ambassadors, that the kind of the tail end of that recommendation is, if that program is successful, those exact conversations will absolutely be had leading into the LTP. So there is, I guess, some reassurance that that there is capacity to look at rangers or ambassadors moving forward.
Excellent.
Right, there's no further debate or discussion this morning. We'll move into the recommendations. I think we can fairly safely take all 5 as a job lot. Do I have a mover? Councillor Olds and a seconder. Councillor Elams. All those in favour?
Aye.
All those against?
Aye.
And you're abstaining. So we've just councillor. Sorry, Violet, were you for or against? Against. So Violet and councillor Woodcock against, and yes, you've got that.
The motion is, I just have to abstain because I've just missed this, but if that's okay.
Okay.
So, sorry, just because I'm a little bit unsure about where we've got to.
So we have Rebecca. So,
Do the eyes again?
no, I think we're good. So the motion is carried. The motion is carried. Thank you. Right. Thank you, everyone. From here, we move into information reports from CE and council officers. We'll move to item C1, which is the CE's report. Yes, you can just speak to your report at all.
Thank you, through the chair. I'll take the report as read. Some of the highlights are in here that we're notifying the commencement of the representation review. So we're taking all opportunities at the moment to put that out there, that is actually going to start. There's a section in here on the Martinborough wastewater treatment plant. And officers can confirm that we're on track to meet those deadlines that were set in the abatement notice for the end of March. So the work that was required under that abatement notice is underway. One other thing to note that isn't in here, we've got legislative updates, but this one happened after this report was written, is that the draft roading GPS was notified last week. We're working through that at the moment with colleagues at Carterton to see if there's anything that is of major concern that would require a submission from council. We would also be leaning heavily on any submission that was made by the Government New Zealand or Taitura at the same time. yesterday, and it was discussed there. They've given some as to the levels of change that have happened in the draft GPS that obviously will be used as part of our reference as well. So just that change for focusing economic delivery rather than maybe the wellbeing stuff in how they've changed the GPS. But we're certainly going through it at the moment to see if there is a need for a separate South Wairarapa submission. Other than that, any questions?
Thanks for that, Janice. Just talking about the draft rating GPS, that meeting that we had earlier on this week with Chair of LGNZ and the CE of LGNZ, there was discussion about the draft rating GPS, and one of the topics in there was traffic safety and how they're looking to focus on I suppose, have a prioritisation approach. While I didn't mention it at the meeting, I think across the country there's certainly a wide range of approaches to traffic management from and we know the issues, we hear the issues within our district from our ratepayers about traffic management, but my travels, in one case I saw 2 contractors doing the work and up to 12 traffic management staff on site. Last weekend down the South Island I saw work occurring on a local road with the contractors doing the work, but no traffic management staff on site. There were the stop-go traffic lights operating, but there was no traffic management staff. So I think, if we've got an opportunity to provide a submission into that draft rating, I mean, I'd certainly be keen to be including, trying to streamline traffic management so that we can try and take some of that cost out of our roading budgets.
Through the chair, that was a comment that was made at the meeting with LGNZ on Monday, that if there are aspects of it that we strongly support, then we should submit on that basis. And the council is quite correct. One of those items is to move to a more risk-based assessment for traffic management than the current protocol. So that's definitely something that we're keeping in mind collaboratively to say whether, to see whether we piggyback on the back of LGNZ or Taitura in that space.
Councillor Plummer.
Yeah, well, while we're on roading, we went to considerable cost and effort to do the traffic speed review, council, which government we had to do. But it would seem to me that we went out looking at things about safety on our roading network. Did pretty extensive consultation across the district, and my understanding is we've just put that on the back burner because of a change in government. And it strikes me that we'll have just wasted a really good opportunity because we got a lot of feedback from communities on safety issues and speed and so on. None of those are really going to make it, it just seems to me to be a complete and utter waste of money, time and effort if we don't proceed with that, given that we had such strong feedback from the community in those areas. Now, they're not dependent upon government policy because that's actually our roading network. And I just hate to see us go to all that effort over a number of years, huge cost, and I don't know what the cost was, but Russell or Stefan will be able to tell us, to all of a sudden, let's just shelve that because a change of government. And
I believe some of that conversation was an action item from our last meeting based on public participation, and there was some conversation.
I think that Carterton said they're going to shelve this, and yet when we're talking about some of our things like our finger roads out the coast, which are metal roads, and the vast majority of people that travel on those aren't from the district, and some of the issues around speed in Martin Road, which we had a lot of people come and talk to us about safety there. Just seems that we're wasting an opportunity where we did all this work, and the community will look at us and go, well, we gave you all the feedback and so on, and now you've just it'd be really interesting to see maybe if bring that up and say what can we resurrect from that, what can we do, and maybe take another look at it and say these things we should implement because they had huge popular feedback, and these things and you know, other, you know, because we've got the low cost, low risk here, and,
Yeah.
and some of the things that I know Tim is looking at is like turning some of our bridges into one lane bridges.
Yeah, so Janice, did you want to speak to that now or?
I'd actually ask Stefan,
Stefan?
because I know Stefan did quite a bit of investigation onto what we could and couldn't do with those.
I did.
Want to come and join us?
Good morning, everyone. So through you, Chair, so I did do a little bit of digging around the status of the interim speed review following the previous meeting, and you'll remember that in the previous meeting, we were asked to change a speed zone on Jellicoe Street. Just
That one.
Street.
No, that's just.
One on Telco Street,
Telecom.
moving the sign out further, so then that would be.
yeah, it was, you know, said to be just a simple exercise of moving a sign, and I looked into it, was nothing as very simple as you expect it to be. If you go ahead and move that sign without the mandate of a speed review change, then of course it has no legal status, so someone's for speeding over the zone that we've shifted it, the police aren't able to enforce that on that road. That's not to say that it wouldn't have an impact on drivers, but we'd be creating a zone that was not able to be legally enforced. That was sort of one thing. The next thing is.
Can I just quickly clarify that? I believe the moving of it was not changing the speed.
Is that bit?
So it was just literally moving it out further away, so then that way it wasn't right next to.
Yeah, I think that changes, obviously that changes the.
People indicating.
Terms they use it.
That obviously changes the sign.
Yeah.
Right. You move the, so it was terribly wrong.
Oh,
If you
No,
move,
it's like 20 metres.
if you move a sign and change, you're changing the speed zone.
You mean changing it from, so rather than putting the 40 in, you leave it at the 50, but because it's going out, you're talking about that 20 metres between the 70 and 50.
However,
Yeah.
whatever the distance is that you're moving speed signage.
You've created almost a no man's land in that space.
It's just arbitrarily changing speed with no legal
What was our road?
basis. It is our road. But I'm just noticing that if you make changes without having any legal authority behind you run into difficulties like enforcement. And the other thing that I picked up was if you make changes like permanent speed reductions in front of schools, that may be unpicked if the government decides to change the policy, and that is an area where they intend to look at changes in policy. So you might go ahead and change some signs in and liaise with your stakeholders, schools, etc. And then the government changes the policy when they change the land transport law. And you have to reverse that, and that will be a pain, and that will cost you money.
Can I just clarify with you? So we've got two problems. One is if we make changes to areas we haven't consulted on, we have this legal issue.
Yeah.
And the other issue that you're raising today is that if we take all the consultation that we've done, which is what Councillor Plummer was speaking to, and make those changes now, we run the risk that in time, as the government works through its own changes, that we may find ourselves in a position of having to undo what we would consider the good that we have done, which would come at a cost of re-signing and et cetera.
But if I remember rightly, there was three things we agreed. One was schools, a variable speed zone at schools. Two was our unsealed roads reduction in speed, which we consulted on. And the third one was the street in Feds heading down to the Western Lake, which was
Western Lake Road.
extends to it's another couple of hundred metres down. Those three things were absolutely consulted upon. The other one was in the square, which can't recall whether it was, I can't recall whether each individual one was consulted and we asked to go back and do some more work on those, but there were a couple of streets in, but the three that we absolutely agreed on as a council and the committee, and then it reaffirmed that council was variable speed zones for schools, middle roads reducing its speed, and I think we agreed down to 80, I think it was at the, I think, can't remember.
60 or 80.
And the third one, Featherston. And Mariah, we're going to have more consultation with iwi on those about variable speeds. So we're going to go back out and consult, and some more consultation on the issues in Marlborough. Is that your recollection on those?
So we did agree those things. And we agreed a whole lot of other things as well in the speed management, interim speed management plan. But it isn't approved by the Director of Land Transport yet. So the point that I'm making is that if the land transport rule changes and the approach to the government, approach to speed in front of schools changes, for example, then we may find that we make a change and then we have to unpick it. Can I just say one more thing as well, is that there's been mention of Carston here. Carston is reluctant to go ahead because they want to wait and see what the direction is from the new government.
And the only road that affected was Honotai Road.
Well, we have to have it's desirable, I think you'll agree that it's desirable that we have a consistent approach to road rules between distance between Carston and South Wairarapa. If we go ahead and make changes and then subsequently Carston has a different speed on their gravel roads to us, for example, that's going to be very, very unhelpful for drivers and could contribute to road safety issues. So it's much, much better to have a uniform approach between the districts for drivers using their vehicles in the regions.
Stefan, can I clarify with you, when you say that the draft report hasn't been approved by the Land Transport Commission, is that because we have not submitted it for approval, or is that?
That's correct.
That's correct.
And most councils in New Zealand haven't done it because they're waiting for direction on things like what the speeds will be on the national highways and how that cascades down into roads, what the approach will be in front of schools. They're going to ask for different types of criteria for us to justify changes. So the one thing they said was that one example of what they said was that there was no economic impact done on, or not enough economic impact done in the reporting to justify the changes, and that there may be a requirement that we have to do more of that as well, actually.
Sorry, Councillor Maynard has had her arm up for some time.
I guess my biggest concern is that when we went out, and it was a process of 18 months, so it was some time ago, all of the information we have right now is what's valid now, and to not continue moving forward with it, then the whole process is going to have to be gone through again, which is more ratepayer funding. And that's what my concern is, because I actually thought that what the South Wairarapa District Council came up with was a little bit more on the conservative side. So if they came back and said that it was 40 around schools and we said 30, I don't think anyone would disagree about 30, you know, I feel like we wouldn't be, and at the end of the day, those are roads that the council owns. So they're not, you know, they're not actually owned by, we're not a state highway out around, apart from, I think the only one that it affects possibly is South Headstone. That's on the state.
No, I don't think it's not even on.
They're off as well.
That's all.
They're off as well. So that's just my thoughts. That's just my thoughts on this and the fact that it is, but I just think it's a shame that we put a whole lot of money into this and that we are then saying, but we'll hold and wait just in case something changes within the legislative law.
I think the other thing is,
Sorry, hold on. Sorry, just a minute. So we're going to go to Councillor Woodcock next, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor.
Just a question, Stefan, just popped into my head. So with the requirements and what you've got to go through to shift the speed limit sign, just for instance, if we go and change our gravel roads to 60k or 80k or whatever it is, and it's 100K to the end of the seal and then it changes. And then in a couple of years' time, we go, oh, we're going to extend that seal for 2 kilometres and seal that part of gravel road. What sort of a hassle is it then to turn around and shift that speed limit to the end of that we've changed the seal to?
That be the opposite, because we'd be increasing the speed. It's not, there's not such a legality. It's not Yeah, Janice seems to have some input.
It'd just be interesting to see how much of a hassle it is to go through all that process every time you go and extend the seal and upgrade the road.
Janice.
I think through the chair, I think that's a slightly different conversation to where we started today. I think the issue we've got here is that this is one of the government's first 100-day legislation rescinding acts. So they've made it quite clear that they do not agree with the previous government's land transport rule, which is what we're trying to work within, and have recommended to councils that they stop until they have reviewed that rule and issued a new one. So they have said quite clearly in their press release that the new rule is being worked on. So it's not that this is a long way away. And they're looking at speed limits that are set for, and as Stefan said, they're looking at the economic impact of slowing down speed limits and the impact it has on time and the ability to get to places. So they may well last or be more around state highways than they are about local roads, but we're caught up in that process. So as Stefan said, we can go ahead and try and implement some of this, but it has no teeth until it's actually confirmed that what we've done is legal. And we would then incur cost, especially around schools, because that is one of the things that they're talking about here, is the new rule will also implement variable speed limits on roads approaching schools during pick-up and drop-off times, rather than permanent reductions to keep young New Zealanders safe when they're arriving or leaving school. So they're looking at variable as opposed to permanent. But until we know where they're going, it would, in my mind, it wouldn't be prudent for council to continue to expend money that may then have to be replaced with something else because they don't agree with what we're proposing.
Sorry, Janice, just hopefully in order to keep this conversation moving, is what I'm hearing from the councillors is a concern, obviously, firstly for safety and community safety, but secondly, a concern that a considerable amount of money, I imagine, has been spent over a long period of time to do this piece of work based on central government direction. Obviously, with a change of government comes a change of rule, but that now has the potential to severely impact all of the work that has been done. Is there a possibility for this council to perhaps send a letter to the minister, actually just reminding the impact that their working decisions have, for instance, pointing out the amount of money that has been spent to date to do this piece of work and the potential for further money to be spent should we now have to do economic development or economic impact type studies as well to further this work, and a reminder that, and for the most part, the decisions of this council are based purely on support of the community.
Could I just take up a couple of things that you said, Janice? Firstly, I think we need to remember that the paper that came from our officers had recommendations for about 50, 60 reductions across the board. They're massive. And the committee, we said no to probably 90% of them for a lot of the reasons in which Janice has just talked about with change of government coming up. And we were conscious of that on the committee. And so we said, okay, we're going to look at things that are not politically driven, but actually make sense about safety. And we said for schools, it was variable because we sat around the committee and we said, well, schools are closed for 4 months of the year. What's the point in going slowly when nobody's there? So we said variable on all our schools, didn't we? We also said for gravel roads was you can't actually drive 100 kilometres on the road on most of our roads out to the coast unless you do it every day like Tora does. And, you know, he's been doing it since Adam was a boy. So I was driving with him, but you know, the trouble is, of course, we've got so many tourists, and so we said, well, actually, that 100 kilometres on these roads, which are inherently tricky roads unless you know them like the back of your hand, that 100 is a target. So let's actually reduce it and say, well, you know, we're giving an indication of safety. And economically, the trucks, you know, in terms of economics, we're talking about transport trucks. They don't go 100 kilometres on those roads anyway. So we were doing things in line with safety.
Absolutely.
Not,
Yeah.
Your point. I was just gonna,
Can I just,
hold on. 2 seconds. The only way to move this forward, as far as I can see, and Janice and Stefan, correct me if I'm wrong, the only step that we have kind of not completed in this is the presentation of our draft to the commissioner for approval. And what our staff are telling us quite clearly is that the recommendation at this point is not to do that. But I guess the decision of this council, the only step that we have to move forward is to direct staff to present that. And at that point, the commissioner makes this decision, but.
thank you, Chair. I'm not sure why we're really drilling down on the detail and debating this to a large extent, because we've heard from our officer who's saying quite clearly that we would have no legal standing to do what we obviously had set out to do in the initial review of our road. It is coming up on the obviously central government's radar in terms of that speed review, and I think we should wait to see what we get back and what they are looking at, because we may well have to go back out to our community and consult at a later date. But in the meantime, I think the sensible thing is to move on and obviously wait until we actually hear from central government about what their proposal is. That's my view.
Councillor Maynard, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I just want, I think that your idea of perhaps a letter just with that reminder and the fact that there seems to be a stare that local government, you know, what is local government doing, you know, to keep on top of things that in the past were more central government. So, you know, like, so things that there seems to be a bit of pushback going on with regards to that. And yet we've done the work, and these are local government roads and that belong to our council. And I just think that we need to bear that in mind, that what was put forward at the end from us is this is what us wanting to help our community. So you know, and the work has been done, the consultation's been done. So I just if there is a letter that's going forward, I would just like it, you know, noted that we're not talking about the state highways. We're not talking about people wanting to travel to a different town for work or anything like that. Which is where the conversation seems to be with regards to the road going down. We're talking about our network, our rural network. So for the most part, which belongs to council.
Through the chair, I'll work offline with Stefan on how we might approach that.
Yeah, because my battle is that in anything we do in council, there's always going to be some kind of pushback from central government anyway in law changes. So regardless, we should just give it a go. It's our roads. It's our people's safety.
We may be able to, Chair, we may be able to test when we have this correspondence with the Director of Lunch and Transport, we may be able to test with them what would be the impact of us submitting for approval now. How would you respond to that? And then
can we do it with any safety?
Yeah. And could we implement partially where we think we're on safe ground as Councillor Plummer is.
And
so we can get into the dialogue.
Super. And if there's any difficulty with that letter coming from council, from yourself, then I would be perfectly happy for that to come from this table. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right. Thank you everyone for that debate. Moving, thank you Stefan for your input. Moving right along. Any other questions on something that's speed management related?
Just thanks, Janice. That's a very comprehensive report that you've presented to us, and obviously there are some things that need well and truly worthy of discussion, so thank you.
And we've got just a comment or question from
Just-
Limbs.
It's going to be a quick one. Top of their structural bridges, in your report, just wondering if there's an update on the, with any information with regards to the bridge at Tar White, towards, the wood.
We're still waiting for a detailed assessment from the engineer.
Thanks.
One
One question from councillor.
final with Janice, the Hinakura Road, is there an actual date when it's going to be open to traffic or?
Get your steps in this morning, Stefan.
Thank you, councillor. So, you would have seen from the updates that we are making rapid progress on Hinakura. Well, in fact, all of the, structural work's been done, and we're just cleaning up surface drains, and we are working with the landowners on setting the new boundaries. We're talking about planting and some issues on dam, but I think we're a week, maybe 2 weeks max away from a public opening. So yeah, we're doing quite well there.
I expect to see the invitation in the mail.
Yeah, official opening, go and cut the ribbon,
Absolutely.
celebrate with everyone that lives out there.
Yeah.
Stefan.
Thank you, Stefan.
Just.
Excuse me, I'd like to know when that sign is going to get changed. It's not Hinakura. Her name was Hinakura.
And that's what we've moved to as a council, the changing to Hinakura, but some of the roads still say Hina, and they're quite different meanings.
Is,
After a person.
if we able to speak to that this morning, or just note that that is a piece of work that needs to be done?
With the opening of the.
I see Janice taking notes, laid that with Janice this morning. Thank you, Violet.
No.
And then with an E.
Yeah, H-I-N-E, not H-I-N-A.
How we spell it, which is now our documentation.
Right, so the spelling
And that's the one of
is right,
Yes, yes,
road is wrong.
yeah, so it's just changing those signs, so that way they're all reading the correct.
Right, we'll move on to item C2, which is the Wairarapa Economic Development Strategy Quarterly Update, and Matt is with us this morning. Just you this morning, Matt, no Jacinda?
That's correct, that's just me.
Perfect. So Matt is from Wellington NZ. Is there anything that you'd like to point to or highlight in your report this morning, Matt?
I can keep it brief. There's been a lot of work going on over both Q1 and Q2, and obviously we are now well into Q3. It's been across the board, really, in the business support side of things. We're delivering support to small business in the Wairarapa, and that work is ongoing during Q3 and Q4. In Q2, the WETS Forum approved support for Digital Up, which is a business capability development program run by Business Wairarapa and Maori in Business Wairarapa to increase the digital capability of small businesses. In the tourism space, well, I believe Anna is speaking after me, so she will probably be a better place to give an update, but the Dark Skies work has progressed. The steering group has been established, an MOU signed and a work program drafted, and that work continues in Q3 and Q4. We have contracted someone to establish a trust for the Five Towns Trail program. This is due to be completed by the end of March. In the workforce space, we supported the STEM part of Wings Over Wairarapa. Healthcare talent recruitment is about to start. There's a careers event coming up in March or April, and we've got a number of new priorities being worked on by the Wairarapa skills group, which we will continue to support. Primary sector, agri-tourism workshops, food and fiber innovation forum. So this is now followed up with workshops, I believe, happening this month to support innovation in the food and beverage sector in particular. Maori economic development continues to be a focus. We supported Maori in Business Wairarapa to run some financial capability development events. And our GM, Maori Economic Development, is also working with both Wairarapa iwi to support them developing an economic development strategy. In the tech side of things, capability and leadership development events facilitated by Creative HQ have happened in Q2. We've got a program of digital fluency testing, which is about to start in secondary schools across the region to establish a baseline to build up digital skills from. We've been supporting or providing the Wairarapa voice, I suppose, to some of the work programs that are looked after by the Wairarapa Regional Leadership Committee in primarily the industrial land research piece of work and the emissions reduction strategy, which is being drafted for the Leadership Committee at the moment. And then a big topic has been water resilience. We've been running a summer series to kind of showcase opportunities to be more resilient for primary sector businesses across the Wairarapa region. A while ago, we also helped secure $1.75 million of funding from Kanoa to support Wainawa water resilience for the Wainawa Industrial Park that has now come under increased risk for Carterton District Council, and the WEDS Forum agreed just earlier this week to provide support to the project with some conditions to make sure that it progresses and increases the water resilience for the Wairarapa, in particular from an industrial perspective. So that's a few highlights, and I'm happy to stop here and take questions as you see fit. Thank you.
Wonderful, thanks, Matt. Councillors, do you have any questions for Matt in the web space this morning? No questions for you, Matt. You've clearly done a good job with your report and your high level at speed updates for us as well. So thank you for joining us this morning.
Kia ora. Appreciate your time.
We will let you go. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Anna, would you like to say something?
Is it all right if I bring Chrissy Cummings with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a little update.
So we are moving to item C3, the Destination Wairarapa quarterly update. Anna, would you like to give us an update on any highlights that you have seen?
So the report you've got in your papers, unfortunately, as I always went on, it's back in October, November. So we're talking quite a way back, and if you remember, at that time was around election time, and you'll notice in the figures that domestic tourism nationally was down, and we know that because of the election, cost of living, high interest rates, people were and still are to a certain extent holding on to their money and are not tending to spend it to the degree that they were in the year previous. We've now moved through summer, and I'm sure that you like me to see the amount of people that are flowing through the region, particularly in the South Wairarapa, enjoying the events and our beautiful scenery. And thank goodness we had some good weather to support that. And I think positively going forward, because we're having a bit of a long autumn spell, we've got more people coming over the hill. Probably more day trippers than anything else, and we don't know how much they are spending, because anecdotally we're hearing that they're here, but they're not buying a bottle of wine when they're having a meal. It's a glass, or they're buying things on sale, or they're just browsing, window shopping. So until those figures come out, it's very difficult to tell. The point I wanted to make, however, is, you know, when going through COVID, because our portfolio is 80% domestic and 20% international. Through COVID, we were sheltered from the effects of this global situation. It was fantastic. We reaped the benefits of it, particularly South Wairarapa. Now we've got internally, we've got an economic situation, cost of living, etc., which is impacting our domestic tourists. Because we only have 20% international tourism, we are not
seen the benefits of international tourism, which is about 80% pre-COVID. And you would have seen there's some great numbers about, what they're doing for the economy. And what happens when you put domestic and international totals together, other regions, their total tourism spend is increasing because international tourists, they stay longer and they spend. We've got nothing that they can buy here, then they're not coming here. Now, I just want to remind you what a product is in tourism speak. If you're in North America and you go to your travel agent and you open up the big glossy pamphlet that says take a trip to New Zealand, there'll be an itinerary of things in there. And that's all called trade-ready product. Trade-ready product are things like hotels, events, tours, what's that? Absolutely.
You book a lot of Americans on what I'd say.
That's right. So we've got things like that they can book from overseas. That's trade-ready product. We here as locals enjoy some wonderful free things, but it's not going to increase our economic impact. We're not going to get inward investment from international tourists unless we have more products that they can purchase in their home countries and then give them a reason to come to this region. We're certainly working on that, which is why I wanted to bring Chrissy with me today, because she's a trade product development specialist, and she's going to help bring significant amounts of money into this region. South America in particular. This region has the most infrastructure. I know that you probably don't agree, but when you think about the whole Wairarapa, the potential here is enormous. And we're so excited with what the potential here is to continue hard work and balance that portfolio, make us a more resilient economy if we manage the international tourists coming in. Not just let them flow in, let's manage the growth opportunities. So I just want a couple of minutes for Chrissy to give you a few highlights, particularly around Dark Sky.
Thank you. And good everyone, I'm Chrissy Cummings. I've got some great numbers and I'm really thrilled to talk to you about the Dark Sky and this trade product that we've been creating, particularly in South Wairarapa. So my focus has been particularly throughout the region and product development, but recently over the last 6 or 7 months on the Dark Sky as well. I'm going to start with Star Safari. Yes, Paddington District, and that's where their business lies. But the majority of their visitors that stay the night, 90% of visitors are staying predominantly in Marshall. How do we know this? In their booking engine, they have to put where they're from and also where they're staying, and they ask them. So this is a huge benefit to South Wairarapa, particularly in Ngāti Mara. We know that unfortunately Carterton doesn't have the accommodation, particularly for the international market. So working with Star Safari is like, they're growing the business now 250% in a year. How do we do that? My background, as you know, I hope you know, is sales and marketing within hotels predominantly, and huge specialist in trade product development. Women's trade as well. So we've lifted their pricing from $27 up to $75 to $100, $150. The $150 and the $295 products are trade-ready products for the international market. So what that's done is we've increased their revenue. We don't have to have masses of numbers to get that revenue now because we've increased the product offering. Those two products now sit in the international market and being booked. So they've seen growth from Australia, yes, but particularly also the US, where we know they stay longer and spend more, in Canada. Singaporeans, oh my word, we get a lot of Singaporeans. I've been canvassing a lot of the hotel operators that I've worked with a lot. I'm in South Wai, by the way, 2 days a week. They're all telling me they're full, they're busy, a lot of internationals. So when Star Safari tell me that 90% of their visitors are staying here, and most of those, by the way, are international at the moment, we know those numbers are growing. So getting this trade product out into the market overseas is hugely important. And just to tap into that, we've got a few other businesses now that we're connecting in with each other. So Star Safari working in with the Tuna Chasm. The Tuna Chasm, my word, 9,000 visitors so far this season. That is huge. We're going to open the dark sky up in there a bit more to a few more people. Pete Monk, as you know, based in Featherston, incredible astrophotographer. I want Pete, well, he wants to actually, now I've convinced him, to have a 2-day workshop inside Tuna Chasm. He doesn't want to get a passenger licence, but he wants to allow Michelle and Ross and the Tuna Adventures to pick their visitors up from a hotel here in Martinborough or a motel, drive them into the chasm. It's a 12-minute walk. You don't have to go through the water to get to shoot to the Milky Way. It's the best position most people feel that astrophotographers to shoot the Milky Way. And then they come back out and then people spend the next day helping you develop your imagery. So that's another product that we're developing, and that's for the international market as well. Astrophotography, oh my word, if you do it on your phone, I've learned so much now in the last 6 or 7 months. We know that 83% of the rest of the world cannot see the dark sky. How cool is this? So the dark sky now is attracting a lot of visitors into the region, but we know they need accommodation. Those that are in Wellington, we've got John Bell of Capital Tours, who's now set up a specialised tour to come from Wellington, bring you over, you'll have dinner at the Martinborough Hotel, stay at the Martinborough Hotel, you'll go out stargazing to Star Safari, you'll have breakfast in the morning, you'll go to say cheese, and it will drive you back to your accommodation in Wellington. $950, I think. He opened that up on Monday and he's already got bookings. So this is what we call trade-ready product. We do want those high visitor spends. We don't have to have those bus loads of people unless we want them. So we've got this capture of the dark sky. I've got 2 groups here coming, one coming in tomorrow, actually here for 2.5 days, 100 people. So business events also, we're tapping into the dark sky as well. So they're here for 2.5 days. There's 100 odd New Zealand surveys. And then I've got Kiwi Kids Charity actually finishing their drive down the North Island. The dark sky, we're having a little snippet of that out of Castle Point, actually. It's where they're staying in the campground. Yeah, they're coming through and staying in Greytown, going to do a little bit of a give back to the 2 schools at Tanui and also here in Featherston. So I'm working with a lot of groups as well. So group business is also an economic development, and it's just around the dark sky. I've just had a client out from Australia for 1 day. One piece of business is $500,000, but it's only 12 couples. What hooked her was the dark sky. So Queenstown, we're up against them. She was flying everywhere in a helicopter. Well, she got the train from Wellington. I picked her up in Greytown. She had a Mazda CX-5 experience. I started off in Greytown, Martinborough. One of the highlights, by the way, was a cheese spawn in a coffee neighbourhood. Whirled around and then out to Wharekoho, because that's predominantly where they'll stay, but they will be spending a lot of money within the region. So these are all the opportunities that also the dark sky is bringing and the product development. So it doesn't just have to be a $500,000 client. We're looking at, you know, the smaller pieces of business as well, but the dark sky is what is capturing a lot of people because they can't see it. So we need to be able to constantly have these really amazing experiences with clients, and I get to see the dark sky a lot. I also live in South Wine. It's just, it's awesome. We see it a lot when we look up.
We start to take it for a little bit for granted, I think.
It's creating the excitement and the opportunities. So there's a lot of business in Wellington. I think they said this last time. Don't take your eyes off Wellington. Yes, domestic, but we've got Takina. Most of their events coming in are between March and November. They're the conferences. Winter is when we want them. When we really want them. That's when we need them.
Yeah.
So to pivot that business into winter, it's a no-brainer. So all of that product, all of the time I spend in the dark sky, it's all interweaving. And I think I said this last time too, we are missing our cultural stories. And that's what I hope we can work on, because a lot of our international visitors really, really want this, and that connects them with our land and our.
I think that's how Kohinui got into it, because Haka Tours contacted us because they've been trying to find a marae.
Yeah.
Because, you know, international students want that.
Yes, they do.
So we've just had 4 kids from Brooklyn, from Boston, from a school in Boston, and they planned all year in fundraise so they could come to our marae and get that experience.
We've got another group going out to Wharekoho. They're Americans. They have $2,000 to spend on an hour or two just down the beach.
So there's all these opportunities and we don't have to have the assets. We know that. We've learned from that. I was down here just 3 weeks ago in Tekapō and Tumaisel, but we just need a snippet of that. And it's when we want it. We want to control. We want to control that. There's a numbers, it's around sustainability, we know that. But all of that fits into the DMP, which is why we.
Sorry. We can start. Fantastic conversation, but we'll just try and keep a little bit of order to it. So councillors, have we got any questions for either Chrissy or Anna? Councillor McCauley, go.
I was just wondering, do you incorporate the Stonehenge into it? Because they tell the Maori story.
Yes,
really well.
yes, we do. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, all of them. I'm working with all of them.
That's quite good visibility.
The key thing is you guys invested into creating the reserve. And we're doing our job at making the most of that in terms of bringing some revenue into the region. And what we've discovered is that there is a huge amount of demand from it. I was in with Tourism New Zealand in Auckland last week, the international managers in the country, and all they could talk about was dark skies. And they wanted to do it, they want a product. There is demand out there. And it's exciting.
It is exciting. Amazing. Any other questions, Councillor Plymouth?
Yeah, fantastic report and very exciting. And Dark Skies, I'm a big fan of it. I think it's great. I'm just reading here, and the Dark Sky sponsor and the chair of the Dark Sky Steering Group is our mayor. And I just wonder whether that puts us in a very difficult position.
I think there is an update to that, isn't there? I'm not sure who wants to speak to that.
So we understand that the mayor is unavailable for a period of time, so he's still the sponsor. It was either between him or Carterton with Leah Ron, but he won't be chairing. It'll be Marie-Claire Andrews, who will be as an independent chair, even though she is from Business Wairarapa. She is skilled at chairing and governance, and she understands economic development and the power of collaboratively bringing people together for economic growth as a region.
Why do we have a member of council, either our mayor or Ron, doesn't matter, but why are we sponsoring when we actually fund based on our long-term planning and things? To me, it may well cause a little bit of.
It's not a funding sponsor, it is just a term, it was a WEDS.
Is it more like a champion?
That's my champion.
One.
So Alistair, it was to work alongside me, so WEDS appointed.
Okay, I just, because Martin will come here or Ron go to Cape.
Yeah.
And if there's that perception that because they're involved in this and we have to make funding decisions in our long-term plan, and I think to fund WEDS, to me, that is something that there needs to be that separation of involvement. We ask all the time if we've got conflict of interest. That would be, because we fund you, that would be a conflict of interest, I would have thought.
The steering group haven't formed officially yet. We're just trying to get everybody together. And at that point, we'll have Marie-Claire chairing that. The terms of reference will be discussed, and also other external people who need to be there. So maybe DOC needs to be, Department of Construction needs to be on that group as well, given that it's a reserve and it's a lot of their land involved. We haven't had commitment from the two iwi to send people along. Maybe it's a situation where that group decides that it's happy to go as is and continue on with Marie-Claire as the chair and just progress that way, and we can report back to the three councils through this channel. It's challenging. We already have the reporting structure to you because you do fund us. With the WEDS, we also have to report to them because of the funding that we get for Chrissy, but that comes to an end very shortly, in fact, at the end of the summer.
Yeah, I'm just trying to manage the perception of conflict.
No, I understand.
I don't know what my other councillors think of it.
Yeah, no, well asked, and I think.
And even considered.
And answered as.
And even considered it.
Oh, I think Hannah's confirmed.
Yeah, so asked and answered, absolutely. Any final questions for Anna and Chrissy before we?
Just, one quick one. Thanks very much, Anna. It is a bit dated, this report, because there's been a huge amount happening over the summer months within the Wairarapa. So I'm really looking forward to your next report.
Yeah.
So I just heard that the government has stopped the reporting for the spend data in October, and that they haven't reinstated it at all, but not later in the year. So
Have you got another tool you can use to try and capture that?
No, unfortunately, that spend data is all managed through NB. And I guess it's one of those, it's happening in a lot of government departments at the moment.
The only other thing you could do, if you don't mind interrupting, is asking our particularly accommodation providers and our other activity providers for their stats on occupancy.
Yeah, we can
We'll
talk
give you
about
a dollar number, but
Yeah, that's
all visit numbers.
we will try and come back to something, but it won't be comparing apples to
No,
apples, which is, I know it's frustrating and we absolutely feel that pain.
I think.
I did smile at one of the lines in here, that the Capital Tours Wellington, dark sky trade guided tours out of Wellington to connect Wire, but day or overnight tours. I'm sure they go home unsatisfied if they come over to look at the dark sky during the.
But what happens though is they come over later in the day in winter, and because it gets darker, then they go home about 9 o'clock.
Okay, looking at the. I'm looking at the.
Oh, what a lovely, thank you both. Lovely to see you and lovely to have some exciting news here. Right. 2 items left. The first is C4, our actions items list. Yeah. Right, and then, do any of our officers want to make any comments on the actions items at this point? Or have we got any questions from the committee? Yeah. Oh, Russell.
Yeah, morning councillors.
Hey, Russell.
Respective action 406 yet to be closed, relates to methodology for finding out areas of risk for environmental hazards. So that came up through from memory, particularly Mayor Martin and perhaps Rebecca. Approach to providing that information is halfway through it, and in terms of getting senior planner to send out to councillors a descriptor of process for the determination of risks on hazards, so that would be forthcoming. It's been partly compiled, but it's yet to come, so I thought I could do it by email.
Wonderful, thank you, Russell. Any questions? If not, we will move into the final item for the day, which is councillor Old's member report.
Oh. Forgot about that.
So you should all have in front of you a copy of the members' report. I think before we start, I'll just give you a couple of minutes just to read over it in case you haven't already. Councillor Maynard, do you have a copy of? I just don't read read amongst yourselves.
Should you start with that?
Something.
Was that yours? Was it?
Okay.
That's one Janice. Oh, snow, I feel so.
Right, so I'll let councillor Old speak to his report. But I just would want to point out that I think it'll be a great opportunity for us to debate this issue, which is of importance to our community here this morning. And just the other point that I would want to make is that any decision for spend today is out of budget. So keeping that in mind as well. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair, for allowing this paper to come to this particular meeting. If I go back a little bit in time, traditionally we've managed to the Featherston Anzac Day parade with little or no cost, apart from reefs and a few other things, because we've had the cooperation of the Featherston Volunteer Fire Brigade and the police in the past for leading the parade. Over the years, the situation's changed where that's no longer acceptable practice in terms of public safety and health and well-being of our community. One may disagree, but that's okay. So now we find ourselves in a situation, as we did last year, with having to front with a traffic management plan, which means a partial closure of State Highway 2 for a period of 45, 50 minutes while the parade takes, while the march occurs. The actual timing of the reflaying of the cenotaph, and then the reassembling and marching back to the Anzac Hall, which would take probably 45 minutes to an hour to actually complete that exercise. It's become really quite stressful for us as a community, basically, to provide this to our community in the format that we've currently undertaken for many, many years. Simply the costs of a traffic management plan now have skyrocketed, and to shut the road for a short period of time is a very, very expensive exercise. We did have some funding in our budget, I think, Amanda, if I'm stand corrected, but obviously when we looked at trimming back the impact on our ratepayers at the end of the day, it was one of the sacrifices that we had to make as councillors to reduce that level of funding, simply to maintain an acceptable level of rating. So we're faced now with a bit of a dilemma, because we've got Anzac Day coming up, and if we don't have the funds, we're not sure how we would manage the Anzac Day in Featherston this particular year. If we do have the funds, obviously we have to submit our applications for traffic management plans well in advance of the event. So we're caught between a rock and a hard place, and I really reach out to you today because it's a huge amount of money, and I'm really keen to hear some feedback. So that's about it.
Thank you. Colin, just to confirm for the committee, last year for Featherston, the road closure was of Fox Street with State Highway 2 remaining open.
Yep.
There was no march, and it was also particularly noisy for the ceremony as well, with the passing traffic. Although respectful, it was still noisy. That change brought about a lot of community feedback, most of it negative. In fact, probably 99.7% of it negative, that the community felt that Anzac Day is something that should be well acknowledged and respected, and that perhaps that wasn't happening in its current state. So I think Colin is definitely looking for a good debate here this morning. So we're looking for conversation both for and against this spend of money. So I invite your feedback, Councillor Lane.
In the past, council has always put towards this, and I just I feel like it's something that if we were looking at doing it, I think, you know, in the future that consultation would need to be had. But I also believe that the fact that this, where we're talking about, that there will be so the traffic will be able to go around what we diverted. So
this is a request for closure of State Highway 2, allowing.
But the traffic management plan, so I'm assuming that will provide you know, an alternate route.
Oh, absolutely.
And so you know, I believe, you know, here we have a dawn parade. Myself and the minister were just missed by a vehicle going around on the dawn parade. When we were marching around the square, last year, so that was very interesting.
Yeah.
It was because it is a dawn parade and it is very dark, and not having the access just on the actual square, like just off, so people could just go around the next lot, but they came around the square, and literally because I was marching with the minister who was officiating the event, we were very lucky that we weren't hit.
Yeah, I was nearly hit too. Yeah, it was fairly dangerous. We redirect traffic.
So we definitely need things like this stuff.
Councillor Bosley.
Oh, I was going to say, I think you mentioned last meeting, Councillor Plymouth said this is not just an RSA event, it's actually a community event. So, you know, that it's, you know, it's not an RSA thing that asking for money here, it's the community that. So I think it's something that should be, that needs to be acknowledged as well.
Yeah, I'd look, I 100% support this. But I also suggest that there will be, Greytown will say, well, we need to close State Highway 2 as well. And so just warning you that it won't
No, and I
be 7,000, it will be us and
that is a point that our CE
21,000
is
is really what you need to find.
raised as well. So, and I do think as we have this conversation this morning, we do need to be mindful that whilst Councillor Olds has raised this paper in specific conversation with Featherston, that actually you are right, that this is a wider district problem, or a wider district situation, and the higher the cost, the more difficult job we are putting on our CE to find those unbudgeted funds. And the reality is that something else will likely stop for this to take place. And I'm not trying to sway you, I'm just trying to keep you thinking about.
But I think we need
the
to
unintended
sort of amend it to 21,000 just to be safe. Now, you might not need to spend it, but I'd hate to see Featherston go ahead and Greytown and Martborough miss out, and then but the negative impact on that would be even worse than probably last year.
Councillor Elams.
Thanks, Chair. Like Councillor Plummer, I certainly agree that we need to provide some funding and some surety for not only the Featherston RSA, but the other parades around our district. Is it possible to have one traffic management plan template to cover all three towns, all three communities for these events? And likewise, is it possible to to fund all three events this year? And then immediately after Anzac Day, can we perhaps have some discussions with our RSAs a year ahead of 2025 so that we can, because there was certainly discussion after Anzac Day parade last year about putting some things in place. However, now it's come down to the last month before the next parade. So, I mean, I'm certainly keen to get through this year, but I'm also keen to start looking at planning for the future sooner rather than later, so we don't have this debate, the same debate next year and next year and next year.
I'm aware also that further to that we have the capacity to support RSA and some funding request as well. So there is quite possibly a much more collaborative approach that we could take to this moving forward. And like you say, we find ourselves in a space where we are a little over a month out.
And as part of that discussion, whether some funding can come from council or whether it's the community wellbeing fund, but also wondering about having conversations with the traffic safety providers that we have in the South Warwick, to see if there's a joint community approach where it's not just council putting up the funds, but if there's some other mechanisms to help.
Good points, thank you. Okay.
All right. Yes, I found it very interesting that Anzac whole thing here, because being a relative newcomer to the Wairarapa, only living here about 22 years or something, it's interesting in that the small towns, how different it is to the big cities, because I think there's so many names of the people on the NZ signs out there, which are the people still living here that we know, and I think it makes a big difference in a city like Wellington where people come and go and so many international people. Yeah, I think Aidan's idea though, because it is a lot of money and you know the situation at the moment. So I think the idea of getting some community aspect to raising some of it is such a good idea. You know, just seeing how the Carterton swimming pool, how the community are getting together to raise some money. I mean, I'm sure couldn't we have some sausage sizzles or something? Yeah, but anyway, yeah, I'd like to look for a solution across the whole 3 towns. Yeah, I was nearly taken out on Anzac Day. When you're walking around the square and the cars are coming around, it's pitch dark and they come around close to where you're walking. It's really dangerous now. Yeah.
Okay, Chair. Yeah, Colin, I fully support the Anzac Days. The only issue I have is with the price here for an hour's bloody work, and I realise it doesn't matter how long the traffic management's for, the paperwork side of it's all pretty much the same. But I think it can be done a lot cheaper than that. I'm willing to put you onto some people to have a look, but you know, if we can fund it and see if we can get the price down. But the other ideas of community funding and stuff, the other ideas is whether the RSA's and that looking to a bit of sponsorship from businesses, because I know as a business owner, I'd be happy to put a bid in. I think you'd find there'd be a lot of businesses that would.
Yeah, that would make it cool.
And I wouldn't want any naming rights or anything like that, just the fact that, you know, I'm helping out, you'd find a lot of businesses that just chucking money. What do you Anzac Day? You don't want Anzac Day written by someone wanting their name on it, but you know, you just want people putting a bit of money in to help, and whether there's something the RSA can do at the front, like even as much as a little jar that people can put in over the year, and by the end of the year you might have $500 to go towards it as well. You know,
so I think there's
look at it.
Good point, Woody, that Anzac Day is important to our communities, and there is likely to be a lot of people willing to make a financial support to it going forward. So I think what we have here is the issues are twofold. One is a decision that needs to be made today for this year, and second is an indication of the desire to work with RSAs and community going forward in a collaborative manner. I do like the point that you make that there may well be a much more reasonable way of doing this. But I guess where does that responsibility lay in doing the work to find that out? Yeah, Councillor Olds.
Yeah, thanks very much for the comments and feedback, because I think it's really important we actually understand how important this is to our communities. And I'll just touch on a couple of things that have been raised. One is that Greytown traditionally run their Anzac Day from Kirtawiti Street down West Street to the back of the Workmen's Club, but only over the recent years have they actually marched last Anzac Day when they marched down.
What do you call recent?
Well, last couple of years anyhow.
Okay, so because I was president of the RSA 15 years ago, and we had always marched down the main street, so it's only recent that they haven't because of the costs.
Okay, yeah. So Martinborough doesn't need a TMP for a state highway. I think it may need a localised TMP, which is managed in-house.
So what
Yeah. So for me, it's really, really important. This is a huge amount of money, and I appreciate that, and I think it's an occasion that we recognise nationally, and it's a response. From an RSA perspective, it's very difficult. From a council perspective, we can't raise external funding for a grant, for instance, from an outside organisation. As a council, we can't do that. RSAs can, of course. So if RSAs were to pick up this role and apply for funding, they may well get it granted in future years. But and that brings into a question about council's role in these ceremonial occasions of national significance. Does council want to separate itself out from these responsibilities and hand them over to the likes of the RSA, or do we retain them in-house and manage them in the way that we've currently been doing so in the past? So these are the questions that need to be raised in the future. I don't think it's a debate to be had today, but I think it's certainly something that I want to engage with in the coming year. Yeah. Thanks.
Through the chair, just with the money that's left in the grant fund, could that be accessed as a one-off this time? I say not obviously subsequent years, but on this occasion, we have got funds sitting there in that pool. Could that be accessed for this?
I think we have to be mindful that the funding, the grant funding has regional wide benefits rather than specific to one event. And I don't know whether or not, Janice, you might be able to perhaps because it's a Featherston event that we're pursuing, and perhaps Greytown as well, funding for. Is that seen as something that's going to benefit the region as a whole? And I think that's where we come. That's where the grant funding perspective comes.
Sorry, yeah. Amanda, would you like to speak to that?
I'm really conscious that the grants have a application process that you need to go through, and the responsibility of our insurance risk finance committee. And so it's not the responsibility of this committee to make those decisions. So that would then need to go to for approval, and the RSA would need to put in an application. Otherwise, you've been making a decision on some funding that no other community group had the same opportunity to make an application for. So really consider that equity from that perspective.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Evans.
I just want to make a point of wondering as to whether we can modify the total on Councillor Old's members' report. I'd move that we have a two-step or two-stage perhaps process. I'd move that we approve 21K to cover the whole district, but the second stage is that between now and then, council talks to our local RSAs and businesses to see as to whether what sort of funding is able to be obtained in the very short time to help reduce the total amount that council will need to pay out. But we could perhaps go to a 21,000 budget to have that capped to cover all three Anzac Day parades in our three communities. But then look at trying to get whatever funding we can within the community to reduce that total amount moving forward. Yeah. Well, this year. See if we can do it for this year.
Just to clarify, it would be 21 plus just. Out of budget.
Right. Can I just respond a little bit to yeah. Look, I totally agree. I think if we're going to do one for Featherston, we have to do one for Greytown as well. Martinborough, as I say, there's a localised road rather than a closed there. But I have had conversations with the Featherston incident. We had the RSA in the same room with Danny, myself. Who else was involved in that? I can't remember. But we came together just to work out the best way forward. I did suggest earlier in the year that we come together with the three RSAs and nominated councillor or mayor, but unfortunately that wasn't quite carried over the line. It's a reason, and I won't go into detail. But I think it's definitely something beyond this Anzac Day that we should be working closely alongside RSA for these ceremonial occasions that will really the impact is with RSAs. Yeah, that's not sort of involved with the RSA. Yes.
We'll go Councillor Gray and then we'll wrap up. Last closing comments from the CE.
Just going back to a comment that you made the other day, Janice, about community boards and the grants that they manage. Is it possible to have some money from the community grant fund released to the community boards for use for local functions? So like Featherston would use it for the Anzac Parade. Greytown was brought up the other day about the Midwinter Christmas Festival that could use some funding. So that way you're still meeting community needs across the district, but sort of able to be more locally utilised.
Through the chair, I don't think it's going to help this situation. But it is certainly something we could have a discussion about going forward, is to that balance between what council controls and what the community boards have available to them. It's certainly the mechanism that I've seen before, that Santa parades, Anzac Day closures, and those kind of events are funded through a community board grant as opposed to a council one. My only comment here is that whatever number we land on isn't in the budgets at the moment. And we would have to look at where we could find money to do that. Obviously, with moving to the enhanced annual plan, it isn't necessarily going to help in terms of reducing our engagement or our communications budget to fund this. But it is an area we would be looking to see whether we've got any wriggle room in. And we need to be mindful that whatever cost is being proposed, you would have to add GST because it's a grant. So if it's the 7186, it would actually be 8264.
So we've heard several,
Sorry.
we've heard several councillors suggest things like the application for one combined traffic management plan, the potential that actually 7186 could be less if we approach other businesses. Where would the responsibility for that work lie? Would that be within this committee table, or would that be at an officer level?
Through the chair, but officers wouldn't have the capacity to be ringing businesses asking for donations.
No, not for the donations, simply ringing various companies that suitably equipped to do traffic management and seeing if actually that number could be reduced.
Can I just,
councils.
can I just make a comment, because it is important for this conversation. Todd Lynch, who used to work for Men at Work with traffic management over the hill, when I spoke to them, they suggested we get hold of Todd and Marston because they couldn't do it for anywhere near the price that he does it for. So when I emailed Todd and spoke to him, and he came back with this quote, he further sent an email, and I said that we really have to reconsider this because it is a very expensive exercise. He did say that he was very keen to work with councils, our council, over future events such as this, so whether that has any comfort or not. But Woody, I'm not sure what Woody's friend's involvement is or whatever, I mean, it could be well worth exploring that as well. And I think if we've got a small committee formed of RSA and council, then it should be our responsibility to chase up and get them at the end of the day, not an officer's one.
Right. Two final comments. So Councillor Bosley and no, you're good.
I just want to, of all the stuff we do as council, I can't think of anything that would have such support in the community than something like this. Nothing that we do comes anywhere close to getting the community together than Anzac. And you just got to look at the number of youth that are involved to say, this is something we should be earmarking in our budget every year. Part of our annual plan. And I don't think that you would get a single person sitting there and going, no, that's not a good idea. I think you will get the opposite. Everybody would say $25,000 in your annual plan, ring fence for Anzac Day is money well spent. And I firmly believe that. Of all the things we've budget, this is possibly a single thing that we should start looking at this as a really good thing from our community well-being and our community, because we are remembering what people have sacrificed. Nothing else we do comes anywhere near that. So that's something maybe Janice said, every budget going forward, we earmark $25,000. Won't get a single.
No, perfectly good closing words for this particular conversation. So taken from that, we have got we've got two recommendations. The first is to approve $21,000 plus GST of unbudgeted expenditure to fund traffic management plans for Anzac Day events 2024. And the second is to collaboratively work with RSAs from each ward on Anzac Day funding plans to support future events. So
up to 21,000.
I'll move it.
Up to.
I'll move that.
to approve up to.
Is the 21 going to be enough though? Do we have to put it to the 25?
I think given that Martin Borough is not a state highway, it should be far reduced.
But do you still have to shut the end of Kitchener Street, which is a state highway, from the next intersection back, so it may end up becoming.
It's just there, it's just that one turn, but it's still traffic management plan.
Yeah.
Well, we still got it, like, theory.
So, Aidan was the mover. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Plummer? All those in favour?
Right.
All those against? Motion is carried. That brings us to the end of our meeting this morning. Violet, you opened us with karakia. Are you happy to close us out with a karakia this morning as well?
Yeah.
No tears report.
No tears report this morning.
Ko mutu a mātou mahi, mo tēnei wā. Manakitia mai mātou katoa, o mātou hoa, o mātou whānau. Ai o ki te aorani. Amen.
Thank you. So whilst this is the end of this particular meeting, we do have a presentation on water resilience. So if I can give you 3 minutes to stretch your legs, get a glass of water and then meet back here.